Hey everybody, thank you for dialing in. You can see a few familiar names. Welcome, welcome. We'll just give folks another moment or so, and then we'll jump in. We have started a little ritual on these calls that I love of sharing where folks are because we just have such a global customer base these days. So I'm in Amsterdam. Gaudi, where are you?
I'm based in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Brian?
I am in San Francisco.
And it can be nice to just test out the chat, folks. So if you don't mind sticking in, following Brian, where you guys are, we would love that. Get the chat going. And I should say at this point, we love a question. So any point throughout this next 40, 45 minutes or so, please just stick those questions in the chat and we're going to take them as we go through. Switzerland, Plymouth, Andy. Toronto, Cirencester. Love it. Thanks, guys. Okay, so we've got, as I said, about 40, 45 minutes today with you all. And for those that couldn't join live, welcome, listening back. Thank you for being on. We will share the slides and the content, the recording with everybody that dials in and anybody that signs up. So for the future of the Kadence Connect calls, always feel that you can sign in and not join if you can't, but we do love having you live. So I'm Helen. I head up customer experience at Kadence. We've also got Stephen on the line, who is one of our lead CX reps, a little bit more technical. So he's going to be taking you through some Kadence features towards the end of the call. But the key person we want to introduce is Brian. So Brian, let you do that.
Hey all, I'm Brian Elliott. I lead an organization called Work Forward. Spent about 25 years in tech, startup CEO, Google, Slack, built a group called Future Forum that did research on workplace flexibility, and now spend my days advising leaders on future of work topics around technology adoption, ways of working, and really at the end of the day, what we're here to talk about, which is how do you build high performance teams?
Awesome. And I am super excited about this one because it's a subject that is extremely close to my heart. I think Brian knows that. And it is something that comes up a lot with our customers. You know, we're really passionate about supporting how you do hybrid well and not only how you enable it with the Kadence platform. So in the next, as I said, 40-ish minutes, we're going to ask Brian to share his content and his knowledge with us. And then we, as I said, want to hear from you as we go through. So we'll take questions, we'll pause through Brian's content and take some questions. And then Stephen's going to jump into some features that are specifically related to what we're going to share, what Brian's going to share in the next little while. So Brian, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for having me here and for giving me a part of your day. So I'm going to talk through some of what I've learned over the past couple of decades in terms of leading and building teams. And I think, you know, the starting point on this is my own set of experiences. I have, like I said, worked in a variety of different settings and situations, 20-person startup, the 100 and 200 person organization, Google, Slack, Salesforce, et cetera. And today I'm going to tap a little bit of the research around this and my own experience around what works when building high performance teams and some specifics there too. The starting point in this, to some degree, in Helen and my conversation was the usual one around hybrid is hard. The answer actually is leadership is hard. That's the hard part. And leadership is hard no matter where you sit. And I think part of the challenge is we default back to managing people on the basis of eye contact and seeing them in a fixed space. And that world sort of worked, right? But it only sort of worked. Like managing people on the basis of is their butt sitting in the seat only goes so far at the end of the day in terms of whether or not they're actually accomplishing things. And I learned through my own experience, the old phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast was true, but it really comes back to how do you build performance in an organization. The data on this is fantastically sad in a lot of different ways. Gallup just put out another piece of research in the last month saying that all of 44% of managers globally have any training whatsoever. which is why people sort of fall back on that management by seeing if somebody's in a seat. The challenging part, though, is not hybrid. It's not the fact that people are coming into an office part-time and working at home part-time. It's actually that the majority of teams have people on it that are spread out across different cities, different locations in the first place. They're distributed. Once you're in the world of a distributed team, you're in a world of hybrid, and you have to figure out tools that work for you that aren't dependent on that eyesight version of it. The other one that's really critical that I'll get into a couple times today is increasingly the work that most people are doing is not singular within a function. Even if you are in sales, you're often working with your marketing counterparts or your product counterparts. And increasingly, a lot of what's left that's not automated in our working world are projects that are creative and cross-functional in nature. And that requires building some muscle too around how those teams perform. So I'm going to walk you through a framework. And the framework is based on a lot of research, but also you'll see a little Slack logo there in the bottom corner. The team at Slack that led our people team, learning and development, had this great framework that I've always loved, which is create clarity, build trust, and unlock the potential in teams and in people. I'm going to go through them one at a time and talk about what each one of those means. So first up is create clarity. This is where we actually get to probably the most essential benefit in some ways of hybrid, which is it's a forcing function to get us to focus on outcomes, on measurable goals in terms of how do we measure success within a team or within a part of an organization. If you can do that, you can move pretty far down the path. And I'll give you some examples as I go forward to this. So measurable, prioritized goals is a big part of it. Second, in terms of clarity, is I need to understand what my roles and responsibilities are, where my authority begins and where my authority ends within a team, and what I'm expected to carry forward. And the third is, besides the what of what we're trying to do and the goals, team norms, how we do our work is really critical too. The easiest example in that one is what hours are we going to be available to each other for meetings? What tool are we going to use to track progress on a particular project? So those are the three keys underneath creating clarity. Clear priority goals, clear prioritized goals is really one of my favorite topics. It's kind of sad. In my startup days, I learned this the hard way because, a lack of sufficient resources, but clarity about what we were trying to accomplish meant that we had to get really crisp about what was most important. We had a literal top 10 list of projects on a quarterly basis. We had one individual who was the directly responsible individual, a small team accountable to it. Every one of those was stacked rank 1 through 10, and all of them had a measurable goal against it. That's a practice I've carried forward. It's actually pretty similar to what Google does with objectives and key results, or OKRs. And it's what a lot of other companies have had to adopt if they didn't do it before. But it's actually a much better framework because what you're doing is you're trying to give people not just metrics and goals, but you're trying to give them clarity. So the things that are really important within that goal setting mechanism are number one, focus. The more you can give people a defined list, whether it's a top 10 prioritized, or whether it's only 3 to 5 goals per team, SMART goals. Uh, 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 oh my gosh, I'm blowing it all of a sudden. Measurable, attainable, realistic, time bound, specific. And I got the S at the end of it, but you get the point. Every team should have a limited number of these goals on a per quarter basis. Aligned, those goals should actually ladder up and across an organization. The goals that we have as a team should somehow fit into the broader organization goals. Otherwise, what are we doing? The updating process, I've talked to some companies where it's just atrocious, where you're trying to update 20 projects on a weekly basis with long, rambling conversations, and you're doing it in 3 different tools. Have one tool where you're capturing it, making it tweet sized and sort of consumable. And the last one is measure it accurately. This is really back to culture inside of organizations, but if you're honest about your assessments of progress, you're going to get a lot further, a lot faster. Atlassian actually talked me through the example of how they did this. Molly Sands and I had this conversation. There's a link here, and we'll share this stuff out afterwards. And I've got a QR code that goes to my newsletter after. But Atlassian does a great job of this. And the thing that they add on top of all of what I just laid out there was transparency. Everyone inside the organization can see all the goals within the organization. There's no mystery meat about what somebody else is working on because you know it. This is about culture as much as it is about the tools and processes that you use. It's about clarity of goals and alignment around it. Second step is role clarity and responsibilities, knowing and understanding what role I play in a project, what decisions I can make. And the other one that I'm going to touch on very briefly here is escalation paths. Role clarity is who at the end of the day is actually responsible for driving a project forward. You can use frameworks like the DACY, the decider, accountable, consulted, or informed people. Netflix has a simpler concept called the informed captain, which is who's the person that's closest to the work that's most capable of making the right decision here. Let's make them responsible not only for making the decision and driving it forward, but making sure that the right people are informed. And if they make a mistake along the way, that's the way it works. They'll learn and will continue to adjust. Escalation paths is the other one I want to touch on very briefly, which is you need to give people a way in which they can ask for help and unblock progress. I learned this at Google. The guy who ran all of Google's infrastructure, Urs, had the Urs Manifesto. And the Urs Manifesto was his guidelines for doing good work at Google. And one of the things that he said in that was that escalations are a good thing, not a bad thing. It's what management and leadership are there to do in the first place, is try to help you unblock problems. Different parts of an organization will always come into conflict. Somebody above needs to be able to make the decision to say, we're going forward in this direction. So figuring out what your escalation paths look like is the other way that you create clarity in an organization. Third part is team norms. So Helen and I have a long-standing talk about this one. Team agreements or team norms or team operating principles cover the what you're doing, which we've been talking about a lot, the goals and roles of your team. What's our mission? What are our goals? How are we measuring them? What are the roles and responsibilities? Who has what decision-making authority? And they pair it up with how we work. And this is where you get into all the critical, important nature of the decisions around things like what's the cadence of my team? Sorry, it's cadence. I had to put the joke in there someplace. What are the in-person days that we actually have together? How and why do we come together? If we are a co-located team of salespeople, 3 days a week might be the answer, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And on Tuesday, we have training programs. On Wednesday is pipeline review. And on Thursday is a lunch and learn. Like giving people those kinds of in-person guidelines and having purpose behind it goes a long way. Maybe instead you're spread out all over the place and you do what I did with Airbnb, which is you design a monthly gathering that actually has to do with the milestones of the project that you're working on. But the same thing applies not just to days, that you spend together in the office. It's what hours are we available to each other? How do we use our meeting times? How do we actually get out of meetings being the only way in which we collaborate and get more asynchronous? And tools. What tools do we use for what purpose? Do we use Slack internally or Teams or email? What's the right communication vehicle? And man, this is one that trips everybody up. Are we using Trello or Jira or a spreadsheet or an Excel document for tracking projects process? On any given project, make sure you know and understand where you're going on that one. So that's the first one. I'm going to stop there and pause for breath, creating clarity. I've just done one of three things. So if there's questions at some point, wave your arms or flag me down, and I'll leave it to Helen and Stephen to stop me. If not, I'll continue on.
Well, I think that one of the challenges we face in our own organization, with being very open and honest with everyone here, is there are so many tools these days, and we have many of them. And we are a fast-paced, fast-growing organization. We want the teams to have autonomy to find the things that we think work best for them in their groups. But then we end up with all these tools and they don't talk to each other. And yeah, we have that exactly as you described challenge of like, what do we put where?
I think the more the
And how do we
tools
find
should be for collaboration across teams, the more important it is that you find some degree of centralization of rules. It doesn't mean that the tool has to do everything because most tools don't do everything very well. But for example, we use Slack for internal communication, we use email for external communication, or here is our project tracking tool that we use for tracking our overall, objectives and key results and kind of key projects. If a team decides they're going to use their own specific thing in a different area, that's okay, but here's the central kind of corporately sponsored and blessed tool that we're working with. I'm going to touch on building trust next, which is a series of things around transparency, having a learning-based culture, and creating connection within your team. But you can't talk about building trust without going straight into how do we actually build it within our own team and organization. I really do believe that there is an important nature of getting people together on a regular basis. And you can see this in the data that Atlassian put out a couple of years ago. Quarterly gatherings actually boost team engagement more than chance meetings in the office. It's got a huge impact in terms of team well-being and team belonging. It has an even bigger impact on people like new grads and new employees inside of an organization. There are lots of other ways to do this that aren't the quarterly gathering. Zillow gets people together depending on what team you're in on different frequencies. They've actually shifted away from being just completely team centric to thinking about how do we actually have cross-functional groups meet up with one another across their different retreats and grow size within that. Airbnb is focused on what's the rhythm of the product release cycle and how do we actually build in-person time together around that. But even the fully remote companies have done this and done it well. So what I've seen work really well within organizations is investing in what's the right rhythms based on whether or not my team is co-located or distributed, and then finding ways to put the technology tools and a little bit of travel funding into getting people together on that basis. But connection isn't just something that happens in person. This has a lot to do with actually making it clear back to team norms. If you can make it clear how we work together, you get rid of a lot of the mystery and people wondering what's really going on and feeling like their time is being wasted in too many meetings. So that's one step in building virtual connection. The other is you can actually, meeting efficiency has become a killer of connection in organizations the past couple of years. The drive for efficiency means everybody thinks that every meeting has to be hyper efficient. Instead of focusing on that all the time, thinking about your weekly team meeting and kick it off, whether you're in person or whether it's virtual, with an icebreaker. A simple question. I don't know where Helen and Steven stand on pumpkin spice latte, but I'd love to find out. I won't do that today, but you could. And the third is if you really want to get to know people on your team and you want to get started, a user manual, a personal user manual that's about you is a great place to start. There's a link here to a Future Forum article that we did about this and with a template about how we build these ourselves. I've been using personal user manuals since my Google days. It's a great way for people to understand me. And the other big benefit is if I'm the boss and I go first, I'm setting the tone for the rest of my team. And this isn't just about like what my personality type is. This is about things that are actually important for people to understand about me. What hours do I work? Where do I work? But also things like, am I a morning person or a night person? How do I like to consume information? Are great places to get started in terms of understanding people better in ways that actually impact your sort of day-to-day, week-to-week working together. If you want to go deeper, you start getting into things like what are my strengths and what are my challenges? What are things that people maybe don't understand about me that can throw you off, and where I need help? So you don't have to go deep at first. You can start off with the basic stuff, but starting off with the basic stuff helps people at least understand who the people are that they're working with in ways that otherwise you're kind of guessing at for long periods of time, even if you're in person.
Yeah,
So
and
that's
I'll just share
building,
on that
building
one.
time.
We tried something similar, and I think so. We launched something that allowed us to do kind of regular and cross team. Well, you guys probably all know the donut tool.
Yeah.
So getting to know each other, and for some teams it worked really well, and for others it just really didn't. And so again, I think that's been a bit of a challenge. How do we apply something across the organization, but that really feels like it works for each group?
Yeah.
And it was just some of it was just too um, meaningless, I suppose, for some people.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
getting
there'll
that.
be those people. Look, that's part of like what's in a personal user manual too, which is some folks are like, I just want to get the work done. I'm here to knock out, my stuff and move on to something else. Some people are looking for, deeper friendships. And so you can't force connection down anybody's throat and make it work and expect that's going to happen. But if you're trying to build trust in an organization, you do need to find a way to build interpersonal relationships and build understanding of one another in different ways. And some people have more affinity for it than others, but it's really important to find ways to do that with some combination of like, yeah, the in-person does matter, but you also really do need to think about like most of people's interactions, even if, think about it this way, even if everybody's sitting in an office, if you're working on projects, you're probably in different buildings and you're sitting in different cities. You need to find ways, especially on those project teams, to kind of kickstart getting to know one another. Get those project teams together for a kickoff, but also have regular touch points that are not about where are we now on project X.
We had done something like that. We had used a methodology. Helen will know because she's really familiar with Giant. But I found that really helpful, like when we all got to know, because Giant goes through and you get different. It summarizes like the way you communicate, and also like if you're future thinking or present thinking, and we all ended up posting that on our Slacks next to our name, like
That's
what we
awesome.
are, like our profile. So it actually has been really helpful to understand, like, oh, like when I communicate with this person, this is their communication style generally, right? And we also used to take I guess it was last year, Helen, where we had those meetings where we just met and just discussed things about like just getting to know like how that Giant methodology worked. I always found that really helpful because we got to know each other outside of just projects, and we also got to know like how each other thought on those calls. So
Actually, there's a wide range of those tools that are really great. And to be honest, like some of them are great, some of them are okay. Having a tool that you use with some consistency helps sort of get people understanding one another better on a regular basis. But you got to keep using them too. Like I'm not a big fan of the Myers-Briggs, but you can, do that kind of stuff. There's crystal reports, which gives you like a typology. I'm a huge fan of the Enneagram, which is this funky go deep type of one. And I've used it with multiple teams for multiple years and sort of seen how people go deeper to understand who's the challenger in the group versus, who's the golden retriever. Hi, Dave. Versus, who's the person who, always has the answers. That's me.
yeah, and
So
well,
those sorts of understandings can help get the mystery meat out.
well, yeah, I guess the one thing that it really helped shine the light on with our team was like some people like me, like I'm always okay. It's like, I'll go last. I won't ever try to go first or like talk over people on the calls, right? Like, so it's like, it was just good to know, like, oh, if this person starts first in a meeting, they may end up taking the whole meeting. So we try to like prioritize, like, okay, the quiet person should go first. But maybe the personal user manual gets to this, right? Like people are writing and sharing how they work. And then we could use that as a team to make sure like we're taking people's best and what they say is their best and working that into how we do and conduct our team calls.
Yeah. I mean, if you're able to scroll
And
down on
this
my user manual there, you'd see the little thing that where I said, yeah, I've got a sign that says WAIT, why am I talking above my monitor?
Why am I talking when we can just write this?
And yeah, I think the point for me is just we did a lot of this pre-COVID because some of us have been working together a long time. But of course, now we work in such different ways. It's just paramount. The people that are joining our team that we don't know, and we're probably not going to meet for a while. Yeah, we need to get to this faster. So for me, that's really important.
It's great. Um, Third part. So I've touched
We
on,
can't see your slides, Brian. Can anyone else? I can't see them.
oh
I don't know
yeah,
if we've dropped the screen share.
I can
really?
see I can
Oh,
see
you can.
mine,
No,
but
it's just me. Sorry.
Okay. Phew.
you're
Thank goodness. If it's still there, that's great.
I can see it. Yeah. Unlock potential number three.
Yep, unlock potential. So
I
first
can.
one
It's just
was
me.
create clarity. First one was create clarity. Second one was build trust. Third is unlock potential in people and in teams. And part of that, there's this funky narrative that gets in leaders' heads around I need to have all the answers. And you don't need to have all the answers. Matter of fact, if you have all the answers, you're basically telling other people to shut down their thinking, that they don't need to participate, they just need to execute. Maybe that's your intent, but I don't think so on most people's part. The world's too complex. But what you do need to do is you need to set vision, right? You need to establish longer term objectives. And when we talk about human centered leadership, people usually think of that as soft, right? That, oh, you're all about empathy and niceness. Well, empathy doesn't mean that you're nice in the first place. Kudos, Sophie Wade, for that one. But it actually means that you actually understand people and know what's going on. The big part about setting a vision is you want to set longer term objectives, but you want to engage your team in how to get there. I was talking with Chase Warrington at Doist about this at a running remote event in Austin a couple of weeks back, and he used the example of his CEO standing up in front of the entire company and saying, "Hey, next year we're going to double this number." It was an outrageous ask, and people used to that person having all the answers said, "How are we going to get there, boss?" And he said, "I don't know. You all need to figure out with me how we're going to get there." And there's initial like a little bit of consternation and uncertainty in that. But then people are like, okay, let's start thinking about what would it take? What would it look like? What assumptions would we have to make? What would have to go right? What would we have to work on? And if that was our objective in making it happen? And maybe 2x isn't the number you get to, but you're going to get to someplace different than if you're the boss and you lay that out and say, I've got the entire path. Second part of unlocking potential in teams, especially these days, is you also need to acknowledge challenges, meaning 2025 is the year of chaos. Some of that created right here in the US. But you need to be a positive realist about what's going on around you. You can't fall into the doldrums of what's going wrong. You need to have a positive orientation and say, hey, look, there's challenges in front of us, but I want us to rise together to figure out how we're going to deal with it. But you also can't not acknowledge those issues. Target's CEO got rightly lambasted last week because it took him almost 2 months to put out an all-staff memo that was basically a nothing burger of communication that said, hi, I know that you're all concerned because store traffic has been falling off because of our change in stance on DEI, plus the tariffs have everybody really concerned. Sorry that we haven't been communicating with you for the past couple months. We'll get better, but didn't do anything to actually communicate with people. So if you're not as a leader recognizing, acknowledging the issues around you, people are smart. They're going to know that the issues are happening, and they're going to wonder if there's something that you're hiding from them about what's really going on and what you're thinking. So you need to be in that conversation and active so that people can focus on the work and move it forward. And that's part of unlocking their potential. The third and the single biggest, though, is you got to reward outcomes. Go all the way back to the beginning of this around creating clarity and that goal setting exercise. If you have great goal setting processes, if you have figured out what your quarterly goals are on a team basis, that's your basis of judgment for people's performance. We did this at Slack, we did it at Google, I've done it in my startup days. If people want to get promoted, it's not just on the basis of how long you've been in the job or how many people you manage, it's what impact do you have. It's, are you helping drive and move the business forward? Is your team accomplishing its goals? If you move your measurement of rewards and your performance and your promotions to being driven on the outcomes people create, and importantly, how they operate as part of a team, are they a team player? You'll actually create a level playing field, number one, for talent, for people broadly, and you'll get yourself out of those fears that we talked about way back at the beginning of this conversation about, do I need to see people in order to know whether or not they're working? But it requires that investment up front in understanding what goals and outcomes you're trying to drive in the first place, if you're going to do that. So focusing on impact and team contributions is the biggest way to unlock potential. Last thing I'm going to note on this is you also have to manage people out who aren't doing the work. One of the biggest things that drags teams backwards is if they know that there are some people who are just sort of showing up and checking the box, but not really performing, and not being, and that performance is not being addressed. When that happens, it's really kind of cancerous for a team and for an organization. So unlocking the potential in a team means, yes, you do reward the people who are performing. Yes, you do set ambitious goals and you continue to raise those goals, but you also have to address performance issues and you have to do it very proactively. Otherwise, you lose traction. So
And it's just
that,
something like where you recommend like because earlier on you had said like transparency, like, oh, I guess with remote first, I feel like we've been really successful when we over communicate. And so I was wondering, like, when it comes to rewards and outcomes, if it's also the same kind of approach that you recommend, like, hey, this is why, like, is that something you make public as a like when you're rewarding outcomes, right? Like, hey, this is our top performer, right? Like, we're gonna do this and just overshare. I
I
was just
think what you want to do is you actually want to recognize the performance and the outcomes that were generated, right? Generally speaking, most organizations do recognize people who got promoted, for example, right? But you generally don't get into compensation and compensation differentials and that type of stuff. But what you want to do is, look, people are going to know who got promoted and who didn't get promoted. If you're not finding a way proactively to say this is who got promoted and this is why they got promoted, people are going to fill in the blanks for you. And if you fudge it and make up stuff about why they got promoted, people are going to know and understand that too. At the end of the day, that's actually what culture looks like in a lot of organizations. It's not the slogans on the wall, it's how you treat people, it's what gets rewarded and who gets rewarded.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're right. Like, there's been times like where we've done really well as a team over communicating, and I think it's been really helpful. Like, especially like if like there's been people who've left the company, like oversharing has always been really nice because people are always going to notice, and
Yeah,
if you don't tell them what the story is, they're going to make up their own story, So,
yeah,
um, that's good. That's good. That's really good advice.
yeah. Thanks. So that is the one, two, three, creating clarity, building trust, and unlocking potential. in teams. And a mess of the examples that I gave you are in my newsletter or online, and I'll work with Helen and Stephen to sort of bundle this up and get a version of it out to people who are interested as well, and provide a link to it. So I'm going to stop sharing here and let you guys either bring in questions and or I know Stephen, you got some stuff to share too. So
Yeah, I'll jump in, and just a nudge to anybody, like really any question for Brian that you want to ask, go ahead and put that in the chat and we can field those. I am gonna jump to my screen share here. Okay, so we had talked a little bit about yeah, like the team perform. I mean, all this is just driving based on teams. One thing that I think is not super clear, or maybe it's something that like during the implementation process it might get looked over because there's just so many other like milestones that we're trying to hit that we, as far as the enablement phase, making sure that there's different roles, like what role should do what, and one of those roles is a team manager where in Kadence we can give the team manager insights into how their team is coming in or collaborating and using the space. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight that, like this team manager designation. It's not a role that you would go give somebody in Kadence, but it is something that you can go designate under the teams. So if you go, actually, I don't need to show that, but we have a help article that shows you how to designate someone as a team manager. I want to show you what the team manager can see. Just note that here on my demo here, in our demo right here, we have this events turned on. This may be functionality that if you're interested in, you can reach out to your CX at Kadence or just CX at Kadence to ask about it. But I just thrown this in as far as the intentional engagement. I threw on a tortilla chip party here where you can RSVP, and I should have maybe done the pumpkin latte on the fly after you brought
after,
that.
right.
But yeah, those the intentional events to help
I'll take the chips and dip over pumpkin lattes any day.
So as a team manager, one thing that isn't super clear, or maybe just needs to be pointed out, is that when you designate someone as a team manager, they can go into the directory and go into my teams. I made my demo person here a team manager over Salt Lake, and the team manager, like it's these like three little dots in the system. So once you go to like the team manager goes to directory and my teams, if they click on the three dots in the top right, your team manager that you designate can manage their team Kadence here. So in this example, our team is trying to go in the office every Thursday. There's a certain building and floor it has us designate. We designate the neighborhood that we're trying to sit in. And what this does, and actually, and one thing I also want to point out here is this is kind of cool. Like this is the one spot in our system where if you wanted to have something not only weekly happen, you can have it every 2 weeks or every month on the first. Let's see, every month on the first Monday, for example. So your team managers, if they're trying to nudge and remind their team members of when to go in, they can come in here and set their team Kadence, or they can even update the team Kadence that you set for them as a global admin. I'm sure we have a lot of global admins on the call. And what this does is it will give them smart suggestions when like their team days are coming up. Like, hey, it would say up here like, hey, you haven't booked for your team day, right? Like you're set to be in the office as a team. When they look over here at their starred colleagues, they'd also see, this little silhouette of heads that marks the team day. Make sure that they know that they're going in. So you as a team manager see that, and your team members would see this on the home screen. So they could always, they'd always get nudges if they don't have a booking for a team day. They'd also just see these different things that are showing them when the team day is, so that there's no reason why the team member could say, "Oh, I didn't know that was our team day when we're trying to go in." Our team tries to go in every Thursday, so it is really helpful for us to know ahead of time, like, hey, who's actually made a booking versus who's expected to come in. So, and you can see that as a team manager, even in this graph right here. You could edit this view and say, hey, I only want to show confirmed bookings, and I only want to show like the teams that I'm a part of, right? So there's a lot of things you can play around with here. One other thing as a team manager, besides managing your team Kadence, is when you designate someone a team manager, they also have access to just their team's insights. So this is a question that's come up like in the past, like when this insight area shows up, usually it's for the coordinator, the global admin, and they can see everything. They can see every building, every floor. But when you designate someone as a team manager, they do get the insights, but it just only gives them data on their team benchmarked against the company. So you can see here, like I'm a team manager over Salt Lake City. I'm comparing my bookings versus everyone else. And then when I go to employees, I have only people who are on my team as far as seeing the bookings and who's checked in, the average attendance. Not like this is the most important, like the only important thing as a team manager, but team managers, this could help them get a pulse on maybe there is a correlation between how often people are going in, are they coming in on the team days? Um, and then, yeah, so I hit up, okay, just to summarize, we hit on the insights, we hit on managing the team cadence. We mentioned events, which we think can help drive people into the office. So if you're curious about events, please reach out to CX at Kadence. And the last thing we wanted to mention is going higher than just the team manager themselves, what they look at. I know that a lot of our clients have been asking just they want deeper insights into what we display here in Kadence, team performance, how different teams are coming in, like how different teams are using the space overall. And we have our base insights, but we have a new add-on. Essentially, it's a consultant that we have. We have a data scientist team that can help unlock um, and get you your own insights that you want to see in the system. So this is the base dashboard. I guess I'm only showing the team manager dashboard here, but you'll see this new Insights Plus button. If you are interested in that, like feel free to click on this and walk through the process of like just upgrading, and our team will reach out and we can dive into see like if we can help you and get you the data that you need and replace this dashboard with those metrics or the items that you want to see. Helen, I know you've had a lot of conversations with other clients about Insights Plus. Is there anything else that you would add? I don't feel like I've summarized it.
Um, I mean, the thing with this one is it kind of can become whatever you need it to become. So we're finding we're doing analysis of like future planning. So maybe there's a headcount increase and an organization wants to plan for that. And so how much space are they really going to need based on learnings thus far? We've got customers wanting to save on energy costs. And so what's realistic? So we need to dig a bit deeper, floor times of the week, etc. But also like the collaboration trends. So really like, digging into by team, what's working and not just like attendance, but why is one thing happening for one team and it's really not happening for another? And the idea is then, this is the starting point for asking questions of that team lead and that team, like really getting into the culture of this, like what is going on and what's not going on. And I think there was a good question there from Joe. Feels really relevant. So you mentioned, Joe, there's growing resentment in my department for working in the office, an attitude of we were fine working from home during the pandemic. Why do we have to come in now? Brian, do you have any
Yeah.
thoughts on that one?
Joe asked, are others experiencing that too? And does anyone turn this around? On the first one, lots of other people are experiencing that right now. I think this is where it comes back to what's the setup and what's the situation on a team by team basis. One of the challenges that's broadly a challenge in all this is especially companies that set the top-down mandate that's set by the CEO, which is every department's going to follow the same set of rules when departments have different ways of working and even different distribution of talent. So if you put your head back to Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan getting ticked off when asked about whether or not there could be some leniency on the 5-day a week rule, the person asking the question was leading an IT team that was globally distributed, and he said, "Look, hey, my team doesn't even show up in the same office. If they have to march in, it actually inhibits their collaboration across time zones." That person is definitely exhibiting or feeling the resentment that from his team that Joe you're getting at there. And so there's a real big difference between like, are my teams co-located or distributed? The other one that I have seen turn it around though is if you do have leaders who are thinking through what should we be doing on the days that we are together and why is that different from the days that you're working from home in ways that make sense to the team, or you're literally talking it through with the team back to a team agreement, it goes a long way. And by the way, an insights tool is a really great way to find those leaders, because what you'll find is here's the groups of people where they're actually getting higher numbers out of it potentially. And it's a way to kind of mine and look for champions about what that message is. The other part inside of this in terms of turning it around is just getting to the point where, you're saying, hey, look, for our team, we tried it for a while. It's not making us any better. Let's relax a little bit. And to be honest, I know that says like, hey, ignore the mandate or the policy to some degree, but there's plenty of evidence out there that that's exactly what's happening in a lot of organizations. I can't remember who put the data out, might have been Density. But like initially, the time in office popped after the mandate got put in place, and about a month later, it's down. 2 3 months down after that, it's further down because managers have to make this work with their teams, and that's where what it comes back to.
That's great. This also, I guess, ties in with the last slide because I guess having a place where you feel like your teammates or colleagues can give feedback into how the office experience is something that we think is going to be a valuable addition to Kadence. And so we are going to be releasing employee surveys. And it's up to you, I think, Bill, to how to use that. But I think just even having just a feedback channel, right? Whether that's through the Cadence surveys, which would be just in the system, or whether that's another way that you do that or you facilitate that. But having a place where people know they can give the feedback on how things are going, I think that needs to be factored in. And a great place about having it in Cadence is then we can work it into our insights as well. So this isn't out right now, but it is coming out here in our next release. And if you have any questions or you want to get a demo on that, again, reach out to cx@cadence.co.
That's actually really great. I mean, I work with a lot of workplace leaders, and so I've seen what folks at Zillow do with surveys and tying it back in with the actual performance in the space. I've talked with folks, and I've written about both Atlassian and PagerDuty and some of their practices. What you guys are doing with Insights is cool because it's not dependent just on badge data or on people having expensive, sensor deployments inside. The stuff you guys have done where you tap into, IT backends goes a long way to giving a lot more detailed insight. Pair that up with actually the employee engagement data coming back and surveys, and it's super powerful. That's the side that you need to actually see whether or not, to Joe's question, you've got managers who are actually, turning it around, or at least are doing activities in person that make sense to their team, which is what we're all after in the first place. Figuring out the cadence that works for your team is critical for their performance.
Percent. Yeah, I feel
Amen.
lucky. Yeah, our team here in Salt Lake, we found a cadence that works for us, and it is energizing. There's things that we can do in person, but yeah, like if there was just a mandate, from you, Helen, across the pond saying, hey, go in the office 3 days a week, it really would just take away, right? Like I think we really found our balance that works well here. Um, anyways, I'm just rambling now, but yeah, this is great. This is really
But
appreciate
it's a great example because, I'm somebody who is working remotely. So it would be crazy, right, for me to say, well, there's a group of people that are together, therefore they must come in together
Yes.
on a regularity that someone else decides. But that is what we see happening. We see that happening in our customer base. So um,
Yep.
no, just really appreciate all your work, Brian, just trying to change that and help arm folks with data to say, hey, maybe there's a better way. So yeah, thank you for joining us.
it. Could
Any
you
final questions for
I was going
Brian
to
or
ask,
anyone else?
as we're wrapping up, if you want to pop up that QR code again, Brian, because I was only up there
Yeah,
for
great shout.
subscribe
I
to your.
will. Oh my gosh. See if we can find the thing again.
Okay. If
Tell
anything,
you what, I'll drop a quick link
okay, great. Okay, great. I just want to make sure because I didn't have a chance to pull up my phone when it was up there. But yeah, if you can send a link, I think
yeah,
that's
there's a link to my newsletter there that I just dropped. And if you go there, what you'll find, by the way, is several articles that actually get into both stories about workplace leaders and what's working and what's not, but also, anybody want to download 50 pages worth of research and studies, um, it's there for free to my subscribers. So have at it.
There you go, Joe. Jump in there. Good stuff. All right. Well, we're about 45 minutes, so I think we'll give folks their day back. But yeah, thank you again for joining us, and thanks everybody for hopping on Cadence Connect. We would love to hear who you might like to get on, whether that's specific customers or influencers, advisors, future of work experts. Please do let Stephen and I know, who you'd like to hear from. Okay.
yeah. Thanks
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Oh.